let's begin by taking a look at the outcome and key issues or highlight from the MPC meeting. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria again recalled that it left the benchmark interest rate at 11.5%, rising from its last meeting of the year. According to the Apex Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele, its decision was informed by the continuous rebounding of the economy and overall outlook. Emefiele says its policy over the previous month has begun yielding results owing to the 4.03% growth in real GDP and the continuous decline in headline inflation. Well, let's get talking now. Dr. Leke Ebenezer is an economist. He joins me now for more analysis. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Leke.
Yeah, so good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure you've been following the activities of the Central Bank of Nigeria, particularly, of course, the outcome of the MPC meeting between Monday and Tuesday. Again, the CBN left most of the key parameters unchanged. According to CBN, this decision, of course, was informed by some of the activities, especially from home and the global market, talking about the global economic outlook. So what are your take-home points? The central bank left the interest rate at 11.5%. The other key parameters, which is cash reserve ratio, unchanged. Liquidity ratio is at 30%. And so what do you have to say about it?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. It is important for the MPC to check both the global and the domestic outlook before they make decision, and that's what they did. The MPC, premised their decision on the fact that there is global rebound in most emerging economies, and of course, for Nigeria as an emerging economy, we have to also follow the global trend. So the FPR, which is the interest rate left at 11.5%, was intentional so that they can, the NPCs attested to the fact that the country needs to focus on economic growth rather than looking at inflation. So it was important that the interest rate is kept at 11.5%. And if you look at the reason for that is so as to target about all the four parameters that make up the GDP, which are the consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net export. And if you also look at the cash reserve ratio, which is 27.5%,
right,
was also deliberate, given the fact that the government want to ensure that once there is increase in investment and government expenditure, obviously there will be increase in the level of output and economic growth to be achieved. And of course, the retained liquidity ratio, which is also kept at 30%, was also a deliberate attempt by the CBN so that a lot of investors can have access to funds, and that can also attract foreign direct investment, because when any economy grows in the level of output, the implication of that is that will send a signal to foreign investors, and when they come to the country, that can boost foreign direct investment, and obviously foreign reserve will increase, and economic development will be achieved. So these were all the parameters that were maintained so as to ensure that economic growth is achieved at immediate or short term at least.
Well, let's focus more on government's effort at boosting the SMEs and, of course, the micro and medium enterprise as well. How do you think the government can factor those sectors into this some of the things that is happening, especially if you look at the fact that with the interest rate at 11.5%, the rate at which the banks were lending money to the SMEs, of course, could be high. So a lot of people expect that that should have been tampered with a little bit, but that didn't happen. So how do you think this will impact on the general activities of the economy?
Okay, thank you very much for that. The plan of the government as regards that is that the government is doing everything in its power to make sure that the manufacturing sector and the SMEs are funded by the government. So a lot of programs have been put in place to take care of the manufacturing sector of the economy and the SMEs. Now, why it is important to make this interest rate to be at this level is so as to ensure that there is expansion in economic activity. And how does that happen? Because the relationship between inflation and economic growth is a positive relationship. How is it a positive relationship? If it is kept at this level, the implication of that is that that will force consumption to rise. And when consumption rises, consumption is one of the components of the GDP. Obviously, the GDP is going to rise. And of course, when you say there is rise in GDP, you are saying that there is increase in the level of output in the economy. So you will see that it is very systematic for the government to keep the interest rate at this level so that they can boost consumption. SMEs and manufacturing industry can increase their level of output, and that will bring about economic growth and then economic development to be achieved.
The question I ask is, the reason why I ask is that a lot of people were expecting that since inflation is beginning to trend southward, the government should be able to taper with that a little bit, maybe bring it to a single digit or maybe 10% to boost more liquidity in the economy, and then have SMEs can have access to more funds, as it were. So have you considered this as well?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. You see, when you want to achieve liquidity in the economy, interest rate is not the only factor that can be used. It's just one tool out of all the monetary policy tools that can be used. And that's why you have, open market operation. That's why you have interest rate, bank rate, cash reserve ratio, liquidity ratio, moral solution, special directives. So there are so many other tools that can be utilized to achieve the liquidity you are talking about. So the government has already taken care of the SMEs and the manufacturing sector. So the inflation rate needs to be kept at that place because the government is not only looking at domestic factor for that inflation rate to be at that level. They are also looking at the global outlook. And because recently banks have forecasted that, the level of, I don't even want to go into that, but let me just say that interest rate is at that level. The liquidity you are talking about is also achieved through another means by the CBN.
Right. But if you, like when you say the government effort, like the government intervention in that sector, it's trying to ensure that they have access to more funds. But reports have shown that most of these operators, small business owners, are lamenting the high cost of having to service their debt because of how much they have to borrow from the bank. How do we reconcile this?
No, what the government did was this. Now, government has said, look, liquidity ratio is kept at 30%. The implication of that is that at every given point for every bank, 70% of your fund must be given out as loan. So we have made the access to loan to be a priority to banks so that businesses can have access to loan.
Right.
And then government is now like, when people have this loan and then they produce, ensure that consumption level is high. You know, let me bring it to a layman's term. If, for example, your salary is 20,000 naira, and then your salary can buy 3 things, but because of inflation, your salary can now buy 2 things. Are you with me? Because prices,
yes, go ahead. I'm with you.
That inflation rate is kept at that thing. So you can't buy 3 things, you cannot buy 2 things. What that will make to happen, hypothetically, is that the productivity and consumption is put into consideration. So an average man, if he wants to get more output, he needs to get more money. So more money will flow in the economy. So if you see that most SMEs are lamenting of borrowing and then high cost of servicing their debt, the government has put another structure in place to ensure that they can have direct government funding where they will pay a very, very minimal amount of interest on that access to funds without going through the bank. So some of the SMEs or manufacturing that are going through the bank are leaving the window created already by the CBN to access funds. And that's why they're having that challenge. So that's not to say that the government has not made, an escape route for businesses to have access to funds apart from bank. If you see some of them still having bank loans and they're having challenges to pay. That's what I'm trying to say.
So how soon do you think we can begin to see this same effort and the provision the government made for these small operators? How soon do you think we can begin to see that reflect on the pockets of the ordinary Nigerian in the street out there?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for that question. Now, in monetary economics, there's what we call result lag. And that is what so many people don't understand. Now, there's what we call policy lag. Now, when government make policy, the time between when the government make the policy and the time between when it begins to materialize, that time will always be there. Excuse me. That time will always be there. So, and it's not expected to be less than 3 months in any case. And, maximum 6 months. Minimum 3 months, right. Maximum 6 months. So, if I'm going to go by that monetary policy lag, I will believe that by first quarter of 2022, all of these things will begin to translate to required economic growth and improved standard of living.
Okay, how should, let's look at these parameters again. Of course, these numbers are very important to investors when it comes to making investment decisions. So how should an investor take position and work with these indicators?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the 3 major parameters in this MPC meeting decision are the interest rate, the cash reserve ratio, and the liquidity ratio. Now, the interest rate kept at 11.5%. The MPC have come out to say that why we took that decision to keep it at 11.5 is because we are targeting economic growth at the expense of inflation. We are not focusing on looking at the inflation figure right now because, if we tamper with this inflation rate, interest rate, we know we want to fight inflation. But then we decide to keep it at this level and drive economic growth through other parameters of monetary policy tools. So for an average investor, it is a good one. Why? Because at this time, investors want to invest more because prices of goods should be high. And in the law of supply, in your normal economics, the supplier wants to supply more when the price is high. And that's why we say the higher the price, the higher the supply, law of supply. So an average investor is expected to invest more now at this time because he's going to make more money. Then cash reserve ratio is kept at 27.5%. Now, cash reserve ratio is the portion of commercial bank deposit that is kept with the CBN. Now, you can see that the cash reserve ratio, 27.5%, the implication of that is that the CBN is making sure that about the 63.5% or thereabout that will be left for the bank. They can be able to give out loans. They will be able to give out loans, of course, performing loans, not non-performing loans, so that they can drive the economy. So if businesses have access to loans, investors can invest, automatic, the economy will grow. And that's the initial intention of the CBN. They are targeting economic growth. And then, likewise, the retained liquidity ratio, which is kept at 30%, the implication of that is that 70% of what bank is having should be given out to people to do business. So if truly you have business to do, there's more money available for you to expand your business.
So this is good news for business operators or SMEs operators.
What do you say?
I mean, this is good news. Like you said, this is good news.
Yeah. So SMEs operators and businesses will now have more access to loans to do their business.
Okay, point taken. Now,
business,
yes.
They will, employment will increase, productivity will increase, economy will grow, development will come in. Now, the issue of the question of coming to a common man, who will now, because an average person will say a common man will bear the brunt. Why? Because he will be buying at high prices, because of inflation, and people who borrowed money will be paying at higher interest rates. But if you are looking at it from that angle, you are not focusing on the economy. So at every given point, the macroeconomic goals of every government, which are four basic things, they are price stability, economic growth, balance of payment, and full employment.
All right.
So the government is pursuing their own goals. They want to achieve it, but in the long run, everybody is going to benefit.
Okay, I think we need to leave it there. I wanted to ask you what your projections will be for the last quarter of the year, but we don't have that much time. Many thanks for your time. Dr. Lekki Ebenezer is an economist. Thank you for coming on Business Breakfast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.